So, welcome everyone to our Inspiring Thoughts podcast today. I'm delighted to have Wendy Copper with me. So, Wendy, great to have you on the show today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you, Stephen.
Excellent. So Wendy's company is Imagine Change Consulting. She's a leadership and cultural specialist, and we're going to chat today about cultural transition, which is one that's very close to yours and my heart. So
Yeah.
I'm super excited. I'm also excited about the questions today are super powerful ones. So Wendy's helped me build the questions as well. So from that point of view, so I know people are going to get a real treat. So Wendy, people are always a bit nosy, a bit curious from that point of view. So tell our kind of audience a bit about your career, how you kind of got into that cultural kind of thinking. Share us with you your journey.
Okay, well, gosh, I've had a lovely long career, 41 years. I would describe myself as a leader and a learner and a passionate
Yeah,
advocate of change culture because
yeah,
throughout my career and what I've done, there have been so many changes,
yeah,
from really quite small things locally to massive
yeah,
group-wide changes, one of which I've led. So it's
yeah,
been close to my heart for
yeah,
such a long time. I've got a sales leadership background. I've worked in risk ops, L&D, HR, strategy, change and transformation.
yeah,
And the last 10 years, I would say, is really where my interest in culture sort
yeah,
of accelerated quite a bit because I joined. It's quite a scary job move, if I'm
yeah,
honest, moving into from a local director role into
yeah,
a head of audit role in
yeah,
group internal audit, which was a different world, and you
yeah,
get to see the whole group. And so,
yeah,
from that perspective, looking at the cultural changes that were
yeah,
impacting the bank were
yeah,
just incredible. And we were going through a huge amount of
yeah,
change at that time with
yeah,
digitizing the bank
yeah,
and the online banking and the banking apps. And I was auditing all of this. So
yeah,
it was just so amazingly insightful. And
yeah,
I got so excited every time I was getting involved in some small part of
yeah,
auditing those stages of culture. And then the last sort of couple of years, I worked in the strategy for the group internal audit function.
yeah,
And I got the opportunity to test the culture in that
yeah,
function. And I'll not talk too much about that because I think it will come into the
yeah,
first question. But it was so profound for me as an audit with rigor,
yeah,
and thinking about how we were going to really measure culture.
yeah,
That's what got me really excited. And hence, when I left the group,
yeah,
decided to set up my own company and focus on
yeah,
cultural change and
yeah.
leadership.
Yeah, and it's fantastic. So first of all, 41 years in the bank, which is stunning. And
Yeah,
Wendy and I used to work kind of in the same organisation.
yeah,
That's how
we
we know
did.
each other, and it was great to reconnect, which I'm super
Yes,
super
it
chuffed
was,
with.
Stephen.
And I think it's fascinating about the bit you said about learning. So that leadership and learning, that curiosity, and keep moving
Yes,
forward. I definitely can relate to that from a cultural aspect. I think if you're always curious and keep learning, you're always going to keep moving forward
yeah,
from that point of view. I think if you stand still and think, I know it all, then people will
yes,
overtake you from that point of view. And the bit there is moving into that group function, that more head off function, was quite I think you said quite a
yeah.
move for you from that point of view in your career. How did you cope with that jump? What was going through your mind, or how did you cope with that jump, or how did you kind of look after yourself from that point of view?
It's a really good question. It was a scary move because the
Yeah,
day it was announced, and I was actually at my leaving do when I got this text from the chap that recruited me. Um, he was my sponsor because he said, Wens, we really need you to come and join this group because we don't have any leadership experience here.
yeah,
And I can teach you to be an auditor if you can come share your
yeah,
leadership skills. So that was a good deal. But then, of course, all they really wanted was a qualified auditor, and I
yeah,
wasn't that. So it
yeah,
was really tough in
yeah,
those first 2 years to really get credibility, I think,
yeah,
is a fair challenge,
yeah,
to say. And I think actually, on reflection now, I'm glad I went through that difficulty, because coming out the other end, I was a qualified auditor. I was able to then go and talk to my senior stakeholders, and I sat on 3 boards in the end, but all of them said to me, wow, you know the business, you're a leader, and you're an auditor. And actually, that was quite profound, really, from their point of view. So I think once I got a couple of years under my belt, but like any change, it's really tough to begin with, and it takes time to bed in. So yeah, it took me a couple of years, but I do not regret that career move at all. It was amazing.
And it's just before I go into the questions there, it's about sometimes scary things are good. It challenges in us, it gets our thinking, it keeps us alert from that point of view. And I think it's great that even throughout my career, I've gone, I can do that. Then I've got into it and gone, oh, I'm going to have to think about how I work through this strategy, improve, and that kind of stuff. So I think it's fantastic for what you've done, and also gone into that role, but realised back actually lots of good things, and it was a benefit to kind of help with your career. I think it's fantastic.
Yeah, thank you. It's good fun. I really did enjoy it. But I think to your point about learning, actually, I think that's always been like a deep need for me. And I think that growth, and even now, I'm still learning. I'm on my MSc qualification at the minute, doing neuroscience and psychology and behavioral change linked to culture, and it's just so key to understand things. There's not a day goes by when I don't think you learn something new and get more insight about things, and that helps you grow. So I love it.
No, I think it's brilliant. It's so exciting today to get into these questions, because we're going to really pull those back and have a good question. So, first of all, we've got, which is how can behavioural science and data analytics be used to measure workplace culture effectively? So, a bit of a mouthful, but we're looking at that science and data. How can it really measure culture?
Okay, so I think really with this, the biggest challenge that we have with measuring culture, I think, is that leaders often find this quite intangible. They understand what culture is, but I think if you ask them, what is the culture like in your organization, most people will go to things like colleague engagement survey and pulse surveys, and maybe there will be a mix of qualitative and quantitative insights, but actually very few of them can really put a finger on the pulse and be very clear and specific. So when I was in audit, the last couple of years, I was desperately trying to do a measure of culture for our new chief internal auditor, because they'd had a change of audit heads, and we really needed to understand where we were at. So I searched high and low and managed to find somebody in the functional area of HR that worked with me on a tool. And actually, you can measure, because my question was quite simple. Can you measure culture? And he said, I think we can. And so the tool that we used was actually from Culture Scope. It's accredited by Hanny Nabil from iSciTech. And this tool has taken 7 years in the development. And what it does is it's taken from around 200 behaviors down to 30 dichotomous behaviors, looking at people and place. And what it does is, from those 2 questionnaires, you can really get underneath, and you can't game these questionnaires.
Good.
You have to keep going until it brings you to a conclusion. But when I saw the insights that this brought for me, and we did well, we managed to get a 75% return of the questionnaires. So I knew that this data was going to be sound. The actual insights that came out were just incredible. And they were very clear. You could see by the whole community, you could see by teams, and you could really start to understand, most importantly, why people were saying what they were saying about the people and about the place. And the data analytics and the AI within that tool allowed us then to bring together what we called an archetype. So what
Yeah.
we were able to do is to say, what does a typical auditor look
Yeah.
like in that team? And why is it different to that team? That's
Yeah.
interesting. So you
Yeah.
start to see
Yeah.
differences.
Yeah.
And what's really interesting, they can, off the back of the analytics, bring you beautiful tools that show the
Yeah.
people and the place overlaid, and
Yeah.
you can see the mismatches against those two
Yeah.
situations. And
Yeah.
thereby, you can pull from that, what do we need to do to actually take this culture
Yeah.
forward? So you've got
Yeah.
what they call predictive analytics
Yeah.
to be able to help the leaders really understand. So
Yeah.
that's how, as an auditor with a rigor in her
Yeah.
approach, really, I was so desperately keen. And I
Yeah.
looked actually at all of the other data that we
Yeah.
had and did it align? Some of it did,
Yeah. Yeah.
but there was a lot that didn't. And one interesting fact that came out from it was we chose to ask a question, because it was a bespoke questionnaire that we designed, about change and how
Yeah.
people felt comfortable about change.
Yeah.
Wow, that blew us out of the water.
Yeah.
In the IT team, where
Yeah.
you'd think change is
Yes.
quite prolific,
Yeah. Yeah.
um, only a certain percentage
Yeah.
were very happy with
Yeah.
being able to change. Other teams, much higher teams, and that
Yes.
correlated
Yeah.
to the culture archetypes that we were seeing. Now, we
Yeah.
never expected to find that in the analysis.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so it really helped us then design, what do we need to do to take the culture forward?
Yeah. And that would be the real about the science of moving forward, isn't it?
Yes.
That's where you take that data analytics and actually it's a proven science to go, these are the
Yes.
predictive, rather than, and I do like the bit where you said taking like an employee engagement score, which, can be gamed from
Yes.
that point of view, or it's only brought out once a year and then people shuffle around, put sweets on people's tables, all that kind of
Yes.
stuff. Whereas
Yeah.
actually a real mature approach is, let's have a look at, and I like the way you say about people and places, that
Yeah.
overlap. I also like the data bit there where you make an assumption of people in that technology team that would love change. However, they may not.
Yeah.
So I think it's a great tool to actually then be more mature thinking in the
Yeah.
business rather than let's go buy a tool that's probably a bit out of date. And it was good
Yeah.
at the time, but maybe a bit out of date.
Absolutely right. It's
Yeah,
so important. And I think what really convinced me as an auditor that
yeah,
it worked, before we got the actual analysis back,
yeah,
I knew this function. I'd worked in it for 10 years. I
yeah,
knew everybody in that team, the leaders, the middle management, all of the audit teams.
yeah,
And I asked them to design these
yeah,
archetype
yeah,
descriptions. And then I compared that with what I knew, and completely it married up. And it was
yeah,
almost like he had a crystal ball, knew.
yeah, yeah,
It was incredible
yeah,
with the data. So the alignment for me really convinced me
yeah,
that actually this is worth doing. I
yeah.
wouldn't say that I would ignore the other measures, but I think they're just somewhat limited
Yes,
and lagging in their
yeah.
nature.
Yeah, and that's a lovely way to go on to the next question, Wendy. Perfect. I like that. So, what would you say are the key differences between leading and lagging indicators when assessing culture, and how can an organization balance both? So, what would you say is
Okay,
the key
so
differences?
I think I think a lot of people, and you and I have been in sales
Mm,
before,
yeah,
and most of us, would wait every week and get all our stats out when we were
yeah,
allowed to get them and see exactly how everybody had performed. And that
yeah,
made us have clarity, or gave us that
yeah,
clarity of where the direction of travel was.
yeah,
So I think the thing is, with culture,
yeah,
it's tricky, right? Because you've got leading and lagging indicators. The leading
mm,
indicators are very much a predictive measure of things that you would hope to see. So to
yeah,
some extent, your values, for
yes,
example, are good. A good description of a
yeah,
leading indicator.
yeah,
The fact that you can't guarantee that the behaviors will align to those
yeah,
values is another question, but
yeah,
it's a good way of, and companies should always have that sense of, how are we supposed to be doing stuff around here,
yes, yeah, Yeah.
The lagging indicator is something, it's an output measure and it records what's happened.
Yeah.
So it's been and it's gone, a
Yeah.
little bit like the culture or the colleague engagement survey. That
Yes.
might be 3 months,
Yeah.
out of date by the time
Yeah.
we actually get all the results
Yeah.
back, which, it's been, it's
Yeah.
gone, it's a moment in time.
Yeah.
So within your culture, and Hani Nabil talks about this, he designed this tool. And I've got this great book, which I
Yeah.
can give you the link for
Yeah. Fab.
afterwards, that talks about how you get the best mix of these leading
Yeah.
and leading and lagging indicators.
Yeah.
Because when you start to sit down and work with the leadership teams and their
Yeah.
predictive analytics, it's
Yes.
at this point that you might want to take a look at those and say, well, okay, this is our leading and lagging
Yeah.
indicators at the moment. And do we have the right balance?
Yeah.
And do we need to maybe dial up some or
Yeah.
perhaps dial down the others
Yeah.
and get
Perfect.
that right balance?
Yeah, and I think it's fascinating. So if you took like a leading indicator, is it that behavioural, you can see it happening. You don't actually need to look at data,
No,
if that makes sense.
exactly.
You can see and feel it from that point of view. And I think I always remember going back and working with KPIs that people would look at the data on a Monday, looking at figures, and I would say, but surely you must know what you've done in
Yeah.
the week before the figures, and then people would be disappointed, and I go, but and then they'd spend hours or days thinking the MI was wrong, wasting time. Whereas actually they should be leading
Yeah.
actually behaviours, and they kind of the lagging indicators are like to confirm that the behaviour has taken place. If
Yeah,
that makes sense. So
it
no,
does.
absolutely spot on. And I think you can see when you walk into a room, and even organisations we work with now, you walk in and you go, yes, you've got a leading culture, and then the data then sits behind it beautifully,
Absolutely.
rather than actually we've got a KPI culture. And I like the bit there about could be too much of each, where it's overdone with KPIs that people are just tripping themselves up constantly.
Yeah. And it
Yeah,
wastes time, Stephen, as well,
yeah,
because, the amount of time, and you and I will know this, that
yeah,
it takes to put all this data together. And
yeah,
what really amazes me is sometimes when I look at some of these toxic cultures that are out there, and you read about them in the newspapers every
yes,
single day, and there are
yeah,
fines out there. But what you look at is that strategy and the goals and the values
yeah,
aligned, and what are they measuring
yeah,
off the back of that? Because
yeah,
fundamentally, if those indicators and measures are not
yeah,
aligned to what they're trying to achieve,
yes,
you're never going to get
no,
that alignment in your
yeah,
culture and your business results. It's not going to
yeah.
happen.
No, I think spot on, and I really loved it about the language about leading and lagging. I think that
Mm,
helps them people understand actually, are we really moving forward, or is there something that's actually happened
yeah,
behind it? It could be 3 months old, 5 months
yes,
old. That data point that people are
absolutely.
grabbing onto, but actually it's gone. The moment in
Yeah,
time's gone. How do you keep moving forward? Yeah, I think it's
absolutely.
fantastic. Yeah, really, really good. So, how do companies ensure that their strategy, values, and behaviours are truly aligned, rather than just aspirational statements? So it follows on from the previous question. But how do you know that they're truly aligned, or how they should be truly aligned?
I think what's really good to do here is to go talk to the colleagues out there,
Yeah.
because what a lot of leaders don't do is, they'll spend ages launching, it's
Yes.
strategy time,
Yeah.
and it will be
Yeah.
like, this is what we're going to do this year, and these are our
Yeah.
goals, and this is how we're going to do it, and
Yeah.
and then it will go dead quiet, and
Yes.
then nobody will really start to dig down and
Yeah.
understand what's going on at the sharp end.
Yeah.
And I think from my experience, what I've seen is that alignment is so important.
Yes.
It's so critical to
Yeah.
have that focus on a
Yeah.
regular basis,
Yes.
whatever the focus area is,
Yeah.
and to make sure that it's feeding through
Yeah.
to that colleague right at the bottom of the food chain.
Yeah.
Because if it's not, then we're never going to achieve what we
No.
need to achieve. And
Yeah.
what's really interesting in that is that somewhere in the middle, that
Yeah.
cultural message has
Yeah.
been broken,
Yes.
and it's mismatching somewhere.
Yeah.
And it
Yeah.
might be that, a a leadership team have misinterpreted, or it
Yes.
could be that a leader is not in
Yeah.
line with it, they don't own it, they
Yeah.
don't, display
Yeah.
it, and that they're just not
Yeah.
completely engaged with it. And then what hope have their
Yeah.
teams got to really pick up on that? So
Yeah.
that mismatch, and
Yeah.
this can often happen in big
Yes.
organizations. And what was interesting when I worked in audit was that you would have very different, sort of from the macro culture to very
Yeah.
different micro cultures
Yeah.
in different parts of
Yeah.
even a division. And so you
Yeah.
knew if you were going to do an audit in that space, it was wonderful. You were going to
Yeah.
have everyone was on it.
Yeah.
Over there, you'd probably have to
Yeah.
wait for weeks to get the data. And so
Yes.
it's just how people
Yeah.
interpret what it is we're here to do,
Yeah.
what, which hill are we going up?
Yes.
Why are we going up there?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
how are we going to do this? It's
Yeah.
those simple
Yeah.
things and getting
Yeah.
that alignment in teams.
And I think that the bit that I think that really resonates there, Wendy, is about actually asking people on the ground, what's it
Mm,
feel like? What's it going on? What are we striving to? So I always refer to the North Star. Where are we going?
mm,
Where is the company going, or what are we trying to do and achieve? We get to work with some wonderful companies that you go, we speak to colleagues and go, right, this is where we're going. This is my part I play in this. And you
mm.
think, right, you've got it. You understand from the CEO, the
Yes.
communication down, etc. And also the bit there is, I had feedback from a client the other day. They said it's really good that our HR, our people director, really spends time with us on the floor. How are things going, etc. So kind of testing, but genuine. Then they said the
Yes.
CEO really comes down, can really connect with the CEO. Actually, talks in
Amazing.
layman terms, so people
Yeah.
connect with it rather than just aiming it at like an observer reader from
Yeah.
that point of view. And I think that's the bit of a phrase that I use often is walk, walk the walk or talk the talk, walk the walk, that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But are you really seeing it and can you connect to it? Or is it just there to show, let's say, investors or anything? Is it for the investors or is it for the people? So there's a
Yes.
good different disconnect there. But I think that's a fantastic piece, really, really good piece. And I just like the bit about connecting with people on the ground.
Yeah, you're so right. Because
Yeah,
you know what? Often you find that because they're their sharp end, they
yeah,
know what the issues are, they know
yeah,
what the problems are, they can tell you
yeah,
how it needs, to be
yeah.
improved. And actually, you don't need a team over there to
No,
sort a problem. You just go and ask
yes,
them and
yeah,
they'll help you.
yeah,
So you're absolutely right.
yeah.
That being close to the customer for me is something I've always felt,
Mm,
going back to my leadership days, critical to
yes,
be close to customer knowledge.
yeah,
And I think that I even as an auditor, I would go
yeah,
back and spend a half day in the branch
yeah,
because I wanted to have that sense of what is it really feeling like down
yes,
here,
yeah, yeah,
from the business
yeah,
perspective.
yeah.
So yeah,
And
I
I always,
love that.
I, and like one thing my mum always taught me is that customers pay your wages.
They do.
So, and I think over the years, too many people have forgotten that
Yes,
people put that money in the till. So actually, how
absolutely.
do we look after them? How do we serve our customers from that point of view? Therefore, they're going to come back from that point of view. And I think over the years, some organisations get it,
Yeah,
absolutely get it, that
yeah, they do.
customer from that point of view. Whereas I've seen other organisations move away from that. And then we say about what's the customer's point of view, they look like straight through me as though what have I actually said? Have I insulted them by talking about a customer?
Yeah,
So I think this is really, really key. And I know we get the programmers on TV about going back to the shop floor. Do you know what? It's just worth its weight in gold.
yeah,
Absolutely worth its weight in gold to
absolutely
spend
is.
time with people on all different levels, but finding out what's going on.
Yeah, for sure.
Yeah,
No
fantastic.
question.
Really good. So, what would you say are the biggest challenges senior leaders face when driving cultural change, and how can they be better supported?
That's a really good question. I think, again, from my experience, when I think back to, when we use the tool, the culture carriers are key. There are
Yeah,
always key people, I think, in the team
yeah,
that are fantastic. They're usually
Yeah.
early adopters, they're
Yes.
engaged, they've got a real sense of presence about them, and
Yeah.
they're key people in the team. And I
Yeah.
think senior leaders making sure they know who their culture
Yeah.
carriers are key.
Yes.
And
Yeah.
that's important. I also think the senior leader, the storytelling for me is so
Yeah. Great.
important,
Yeah.
from
Really.
understanding what is the vision, how are we,
Yes.
what's the strategy, how are we going to get
Yeah.
there, and what's in it for me, actually, the
Yeah.
motivators of their team, and
Yeah.
making sure that the stories bring
Yeah.
alive
Yeah.
that picture for the team, so that there's no doubt as to what it
Yes.
is that we're trying to do and why it's
Yeah.
important. I think
Yeah.
those are really important. I think the why is really key, and
Yeah.
often this is missed,
Yeah.
and it's interesting, some of the strap lines, understanding
Yeah.
what that means and actually why are we doing it.
Yes.
It took me a while, to be honest, when I worked
Yeah.
at Lloyd's, to understand helping Britain prosper. Well, what did
Yeah.
that mean exactly, and
Yes.
why
Yeah.
why was this important?
Yeah.
Over time, and
Yeah.
that took several years for us to
Yeah.
really, as a team, I
Yeah.
think, get to grips with why we were doing that and why
Yeah.
that was important.
Yeah.
Um, I think words, music, and dance you've talked about, it's all very well as a team leader,
Yeah.
acknowledging it might be actually that leader doesn't quite get
Yeah.
engaged with
Yeah.
the vision and the strategy
Yeah.
and the culture and the
Yeah.
values. And therefore, that senior team are
Yeah.
really critical.
Yeah.
But I think mostly the middle management
Yeah.
group often seem to be the group that get a little neglected. And,
Yeah.
it's a bit like the waterfall, the
Yes.
further down it goes, the more
Yeah.
diluted it becomes. And all of
Yeah.
a sudden, you have a bit of a wishy-washy
Yes.
message down here,
Yeah.
unless you've got it
Yeah.
regularly,
Yeah.
and consistently communicated. And there are
Yeah.
lots of ways you can do that. You can bring
Yes.
people together. You can
Yeah.
have regular, how are we
Yeah.
doing against
Yes.
whatever get-togethers. I also think the right lagging indicators, and
Yeah.
not too much focus on those, but looking at the leading indicators
Yes.
that we've talked about.
Yeah.
Um, and I think if you see signs, like my little alarm bells would normally go,
Yeah.
if there's a problem, if you make a mistake, if
Yeah.
I can't innovate and change
Yes.
something round here, and if I've sensed a lack of trust,
Yeah.
then I will know in that team
Yeah.
that something's not quite sitting quite right,
Yes.
and I'd need to dig a little more.
Yeah.
And then you can go back to the leadership to sort of
Yes.
understand and explore that a little bit more.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's
Yeah.
probably
And I
the
think,
key
and the
reasons.
bit, the part that you picked up about storytelling, and it
Yeah.
just that actually resonated with me. So I remember one of my line manager, Ian Hallett, did a brilliant presentation about trust.
Mm,
And I remember about the bank, and it was about share price.
yeah.
And he put the story in about the share price going up and down is all built on trust, not about what you contribute. It's about whether people believe in your story
Mm,
of going forward. And that was, I remember that day vividly, a beautiful conference. And I thought, that has just literally got me understanding about the share price, how people trust in us, those
absolutely.
kind of stuff, that point of view, and that future predictor. So if you go back to that
Yes.
leading and lagging, you go, do you know what? That's the story. And I think there's a bit there of people who've got to spend time telling the story of where the
Yes.
organisation is going, where's the company going, what's the strap line we're saying, and what does that actually mean on the ground?
Yeah.
And I think back with you, once I understood helping Britain prosper, and I was
Yeah.
like, oh, I kind of get it.
Yeah.
Yeah, I feel that feels good that we're actually not just trying to drive revenue. It's about helping other people, how they,
Yes.
it could be plumbers, builders, etc. We're all doing from just like a mortgage.
Yeah.
So I think that really, really resonates. I think the other bit that sticks out for me is um, organisations have seem to have been brought up of, let's spend a lot of time with the top 20% of people. So if we took the bell curve,
Yeah.
top 20% of people, those 70% roughly in the middle, and then 10% at the bottom. The 10% and 20% seem to get a lot of attention, but
Yeah.
at 70%, I think people are
Yes.
absolutely missing out. They are your engine of your company. They just do a
Absolutely.
good job We need to keep upskilling and training them. It's like those middle managers, they do an
Yes.
amazing job. You've got to keep upskilling them and develop them.
Yeah.
Whereas I see it so often that people go, right, we're spending a lot of people getting rid of people, 10%. Or 20% those top people are always going to be top people. So
Yeah.
let's think about where do we distribute the funds to
Absolutely.
really help. And I've just got a bit in mind. If you took people's skill set 6 months ago, a year ago, it's not current.
Yeah.
So especially the way if you took AI, I think moving forward from that point of view, if you took now where we say to organisations, spend time and money upskilling people's skill set, even if they want to stay in that job, you've got to make
Yeah.
it current, because then they'll
Yes.
keep growing and they'll stay with you rather than they'll become stagnant and people
Mm.
will overtake them. But yeah, I think it's I'm on my passionate cultural transition high horse there,
Absolutely.
Wendy.
Agree
Yeah,
with you 100%.
yeah. But it's a great topic, isn't it? Really get stuck into. So, how can audit teams play a proactive role in assessing and shaping organisational culture beyond just compliance?
Wow, this is a great question.
Mm,
I think there are a couple of ways. I mean, when I joined audit, again, culture's very hard to measure. People
yeah.
really struggled with how do we set, what controls have they got around culture?
Yes.
Well, they might have retention, they might
Yeah.
have, talent management, they
Yeah.
might have people scores on the
Yes.
doors, all of that stuff. But
Yeah.
is that really what
Yeah.
culture's about? And
Yeah.
I was just to encourage my team, and I would go with them and we would
Yeah.
work in the business area
Yeah.
and
Good.
actually really understanding
Yeah.
what is going on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
How easy is it to get access to people? How
Yeah.
easy is it to get data? How
Yeah.
serious do they take the
Yeah.
audit that we're doing? And how important,
Yeah.
is it that everybody knows about
Yeah.
what's happening within the audit,
Yeah.
And so there are so many ways that auditors can actually build in
Yeah.
ways of testing culture with actually just doing their control testing in
Yeah.
the way that they're doing it now, but asking one or two other
Yeah.
questions. The L&D side of things, the
Yeah.
recruitment side of things, just little questions that
Yeah.
actually can really give you a sense of,
Yeah.
what is the tenure of this team? How long have they
Yeah.
been here? What is the
Yeah.
progression like? What development are they
Yeah.
getting? What are the hotspots for them? All of that.
Yes.
And the only other thing I would say is, interestingly, when I did the culture work in the audit function, it struck me one of the other things I would have loved to have done
Yeah.
in the audit function is to have gotten the tool that we used
Yeah.
into the business. So
Yeah.
if we've got a third of our audit plan
Yeah.
in the IT and transformation world,
Yeah.
I would have loved to have sent those
Yeah.
questionnaires and done the cultural
Yeah.
kind of
Yeah.
data analytics and AI tool
Yeah.
to have assessed it, because fundamentally
Yeah.
that is a chunk of risk in that
Yes.
area, and
Yeah.
to have gotten the culture feedback through
Yeah.
the culture scope tool would have been
Yeah.
incredible.
Yeah, and I think that bit there, if you took back as an auditor, so if you
Mm.
think about from that point of view, if an auditor goes in and does like the tick box exercise,
Yep.
that's okay. That's okay. Whereas actually, where I've worked with auditors over the years, like yourself, like with other people that really want to support the business, understand the business, it becomes a two-way relationship
Yes.
rather than actually it's a done to relationship,
Yes.
whereas actually it becomes a two-way and you go, oh, okay, that, yeah, I can see that differently, how can I work that better from that point of view. I also, we get to work with some great external, so Adrian and Adam, where we work with a different organization, how they try to see it from the kind of user perspective
Yes.
rather than from the regulator perspective. So
Yep.
they really work hard on going, actually, how do our users use
Mm.
this, and ask the other extra one or two questions rather
Yep.
than, well, the regulator says this, that's what you've got to do. And I've definitely seen over the years, and also I remember towards the end of my tenure at the bank, I worked with some really good auditors, and it was pleasant. I enjoyed
Mm.
it
Yeah.
rather than going, oh, here we go, and this kind of stuff. And I always think the other thing that really sticks in my mind, an auditor isn't there to just do it once a year. You should be doing these things
Yeah.
daily. If that makes sense,
Absolutely.
then the auditor comes to compliment, doesn't it? They're like
Yeah.
good stuff, rather than if you're not doing it, the auditor is going to catch you out. They're there to protect the bank or
Yeah.
protect the industry. But I just think if you're doing things daily, the auditor is compliment, and you'll get better growth.
Yes, for
Would that make
sure.
sense?
It does make complete sense.
Yeah.
And I think there's confidence and trust in the colleagues because they
Yeah.
know that actually, you're there to help them and protect
Yes.
them and
Yeah.
not catch them out, and
Yes.
it's okay to do stuff wrong. You
Yeah.
can't learn
No.
if you don't make mistakes.
Yeah.
And for me, it's really important. I'd rather
Yeah.
somebody learn to do something because of something that
Yes.
they've experienced, because do you know what? They actually won't do that again. They'll figure a
Correct.
way around it,
Yeah.
and take it forward themselves.
Yeah.
Yeah.
No, I definitely agree. So the last question I'm going to ask you today is, who or some of the most inspiring leaders you've encountered, and what makes them so effective at leading change while bringing people along with them?
So, I really had to think about this one. That's a great
Yeah.
question. I've got three people that really come to mind for me.
Yeah.
Stephen Noakes was one of the directors in Change, and I
Mm.
did some audits with him very early on.
Yeah.
What really inspired me about him as a leader was his ability to be so knowledgeable and calm. And those
Mm.
characteristics, he was incredibly close
Yeah.
to his team, his directs, but the wider team and his
Yeah.
risks. And he
Yeah.
really knew and thought very holistically
Yeah.
about things. And
Yeah.
that always used to really impress me,
Mm.
particularly in my audit role. And I can remember having, some
Yeah.
really fantastic discussions with him.
Yeah.
And he was also very proactive in
Yeah.
what he wanted, to move
Yeah.
forward. So he really inspired me. Ian Kirkpatrick, I've
Mm.
just written down Hearts and Minds.
Mhm.
And I work for Ian on several occasions. He's now the CEO at Market Harborough.
Yeah.
And I actually reached out to him the other day because I was talking with Sandro Boeri, who's the president of the IIA,
Yeah.
looking at culture at the
Yeah.
moment. And he asked me, have you got somebody that you really think understands
Yeah.
culture? Stephen, I can't tell you,
Yeah.
he stands in my right up there for me
Yeah.
as a leader. I would go through brick walls for that
Yeah.
guy. He was amazing. And he just, that stories and
Yeah.
bringing to life what he wants me to do, why he
Yeah.
wants me to do it. I
Yeah.
think from a very early stage in my career, he was very, very eloquent
Yeah.
at getting that story out
Yeah.
there and following through. And then the
Yeah.
final one I've got is Paul Day, actually, who was our chief internal auditor,
Yeah.
and he was incredible.
Yeah.
He had some really big
Yeah.
challenges to tackle, but he had that really lovely, calm, engaging, inclusive way of
Yeah.
very, very thoughtfully
Yeah.
making the changes in little chunks as we
Yeah.
went along, rather than one big change.
Yeah.
And brought in, and the biggest thing he did was to
Yeah.
change the way we thought about data analytics in audit.
Yeah.
And, we'd gone from a team of maybe 8 to 10 to like 50
Mm.
in 5 years. And he just gave us confidence. It's okay to
Yeah.
make mistakes,
Yeah.
actually.
Yeah.
And I think those qualities, he was incredibly creative, incredibly
Yeah.
innovative.
Yeah.
And you could just go and grab a coffee with him and
Yes.
sit down. His desk was, or
Yeah.
his door was always open, and you
Yeah.
could always, just go up and say hi to him and
Yeah.
and just get a view on something.
Yeah.
And I think those qualities in those three leaders
Mm.
kind of really encompass things for me.
Yeah. And it's great to see off of those different people. So I read when we talk to people, we say you don't have to be that leader, but pick the good traits that you like that
Yes.
resonate to build your own leadership skills.
Yes.
And I remember a couple of leaders for me. So earlier on, one of my kind of big promotions was through Andrew Dickinson. So that was in financial services.
Yeah.
Now, what I liked about him is we had a team that was very, very successful, but he empowered. empowered and trust. And I remember I was a young guy at the time thinking, and a lot of people, and I had comments going, well, how did you get a job and all this kind of stuff? But he could see vision and going, actually, drive, passion, those kind of stuff. So I take my hat off to him. And it was funny, quite a few years ago, I actually bumped into him.
Oh, did you?
Because I think he now lives in France in Morzine, but we
Wow.
bumped into him. And it was quite a surreal moment. So it was great to bump into him again. And the other leader that really stands out for me was Andrew Bottomley, who I think is just leaving Skipton Building Society. But that goes back to you about being genuine. And I remember there was a mistake I made, and I rang him up, and he didn't have a go at me. He just said to me, talk through what's gone on. What have you learnt by it? And I remember talking it through, and I said to him, like, this is what I've learnt by it. And he went, great. And I said, excuse me. I said, are you not going to rollock me? And he said, well, why do I need to do that? He said, you've learned. And I always remember that thinking, wow, that's like a good coaching session, because I've come up with the answers. But there's those people in our lives that we've got to look for those inspiration to go by. Yeah, I think it's fantastic. It's really, really good.
So true, Stephen. I love that.
Yeah. So, Wendy, this has been delightful catching up with you today. Really, really exciting. And I know we'll do lots of good stuff in the future. So how can people reach out to you? What's the best way to connect with you from that point of view after the podcast today?
They can get me on LinkedIn, message me on LinkedIn. My phone number's on there as well. My website is just about to go live in the next couple of weeks, so they'll be able to contact me there. But yes, it's just been amazing. Thank you, Stephen. I really have loved the opportunity to talk to you about something we're both so passionate about. And yes, it's just been amazing. Loved working with you when I was at Lloyd's, and I'm sure we'll do lots more together. Yeah,
so I really, really appreciate it. And the good thing today, the sun is shining in March. So that is an amazing thing as well, isn't it, Wendy? So
I brought it with me from Hull's.
So you brought, we won't say where Wendy can share where she went on holiday, but from that point of view, but you just had a wonderful holiday. So but it's great in March, and I'm sure we've seen the newspapers, it's probably hotter than Ibiza, which always comes down, isn't it? So can I just say a huge thank you. Thank you so much for joining today. And I really, really appreciate it.
Thank you for inviting me, Stephen. Really
appreciate it.
Thank you, Wendy.